Okay, so we've had a ton of friends and people that we've run into ask us, why don't you put this thing on YouTube and get it on the internet? Because it's so cool. So we're finally going to do it. This is the first video we've ever shot, and it's of the 1992 Thomas Built safety liner that we converted into an RV. So the bus, it's a 40-foot bus that we got from a church in Illinois. The church group apparently had bought it from a school district who had it until they were done with it, and then the church picked it up and they had it for several years, and then we got it. When we bought it, it was all silver. It had some maroon stripes on it, and it was still a conventional school bus. It still had all of the sliding windows on the sides, emergency exits on the top, and the one side emergency door, and all the school bus seats in it. It was green, and it had that smell that all school buses have. And it's considered an activity bus, so it had 4 access doors right around the middle of the bus that opened up into a very large compartment that allowed us to put all of our utilities in. So it worked out really, really well. We, of course, started by removing all of the seats like everybody does, and we pulled the floor out to get that smell out of it. And then we removed all the windows, really gutted it out. And I'm going to try and show you some of that from some still images that we had taken during the process. So hopefully you get a really good idea of what it is that we did. We knocked about 250, 300 pounds of rust off of it. If I can make any recommendations, it would be take a really good close look at the bus before you buy it and consider the environment where it spent most of its life. Illinois apparently is pretty bad for rust. So after getting that all cleaned up, we did an extensive amount of work to it mechanically. So underneath, we replaced all of the shocks. It's not an air ride, it's got just standard gas shocks on it. We replaced those. We replaced all of the air canisters for the air brake system. We pulled all the wheels off, all the drums off, inspected them, cleaned them up, painted them, replaced all of the bearings in the wheels, redid the oil in the rear differential. Full service, full grease, made sure everything was working right, knocked off all the rust again, and painted a lot of the things. We also fully serviced the engine. It was in pretty good shape. We're not sure how many miles were on it. We don't think that the speedometer was original, but we know that it has about 8,000 hours on the tachometer, which is original equipment, we think. So we're in good shape there. Underneath the bus is where we have all of our utilities. So our electrical distribution, our electrical panels, our high voltage, which is 110 volt AC, and our low voltage 12 volt DC systems are all fused and circuit breakered under there. We have an 8,000 watt gas generator underneath. We have a 50-gallon black water tank, a 50-gallon gray water tank, and I think a 75-gallon freshwater tank with a high output quiet water pump, which works really, really well. And we have 8 deep cycle batteries. I think it's about 1,200 or 1,300 amp hours of battery underneath the bus as well. They're connected to the generator and can also be charged. Well, actually, they're connected to a Xantrex charge. It's a converter inverter. So it accepts charges from 2 solar panels on top. We have about 130 watts of solar on the roof, or from shore power, which can be 20, 30, or 50 amp, as well as from the generator, which is a 30 amp breaker on the generator. So we really don't have a problem with our solar power. Or with our power. We've got a lot of power we can store, and we can make it several days, if not indefinitely, with just the 2 solar panels that we have on the roof. A lot of things that impact how much power you're going to use, of course, is the time of the year and the climate outside. Right now we're in a shoulder season here in Colorado. It's beautiful. It's getting down to about 43, 44 degrees last night. It's getting up into the high 60s during the day, so we're not running any AC. We do run heat at night. It gets a little chilly, and we have multiple heating systems on board. We're currently plugged into a 20 amp breaker electrical cord, and that's supplying enough power for us to run our electric heater. We have an electric, it's not a base, but it's like one of those fan oscillating heaters. Works really well, keeps the chill off, kind of keeps things stable. And then we also have a gas furnace that does a bulk of the heating when it starts to get cold outside. Additionally, we have 2 Dometic AC units on the roof. One of those units has a heat pump which is effective at lower temperatures like in the 40s, but gets less effective as you approach freezing temperatures. And then on the front unit, we have a heating coil inside the Dometic unit, and that works a little bit more efficient, or rather effectively. It's a space heater, so you turn it on, it blows air across the heating element and keeps things warm up front. Of course, if you're not hooked up to shore power and you're driving down the road, you have the conventional heat, which is in the dash, and it helps keep the driver comfortable, but doesn't do much for the back of the bus. The two heaters that were in the bus, they're like fans with heater cores in them. We removed those. They're no longer in the bus. But the furnace works fairly well going down the road. Again, down into the temperatures, into the, below freezing, you're okay. But you get down into the teens, things start to get pretty cold. Now, on the warm days here in Colorado, it's not a big deal. I mean, if it's in the 70s or 80s, it's very easy to keep the bus relatively cool and comfortable. In the direct sunlight on a hot day, for example, we went to Country Jam in Grand Junction a couple of years back with it, and we found that it just couldn't keep up. That we were 50 amp plugs, had both AC units on, and it just cooked. It was just super, super hot. Now, I've been in other Class A's. It's not a unique problem. I mean, if it gets above 100 degrees, it's hard to keep these things cool. So you just find other things to do, like get in your tow vehicle and go to the mall. The powertrain on this safety liner is an 8.3 liter Cummins with an Allison MT643 transmission. Very durable drivetrain. Again, I think it has about 8,000 hours on it, but she holds great oil pressure and doesn't leak any fluids. We can pull up onto a really nice pad, sit there for a week, and when we roll off it's clean. We did do a couple of modifications to the engine. The biggest modification we put on was a fuel plate or adapter plate on the fuel injection pump. It came to us with 210 horsepower, and that was a little light for up in the mountains. We couldn't get over some of the passes. I remember Wolf Creek Pass was a bit of we made it up without stopping, but when we got to the top, the engine light went on and we had to pull over and let her cool off a little bit. The modification that we did to the injector plate took it up to about 285 horsepower. So she gets off the line a little better, she tows a little better. You just have to be mindful, especially up here at altitude, that you are going to run higher EGTs, exhaust gas temperatures. So when I'm driving the vehicle and I'm heavy and I'm in the mountains and I'm at high altitude, that's the primary gauge that I look at, is the EGT, because I want to make sure that the engine's not going to overheat. So I have a target and a digital EGT gauge in there, which I'll show you how that operates. And I drive by EGT, but the horsepower upgrade has definitely helped us quite a bit. Other modifications that we've made to the bus is a cruise control, and we took it from here in Colorado back to the East Coast last year, and the bus did great, but my right foot was sore and my right shin was cramping up, and it was because you're constantly modulating the throttle. So we put an aftermarket, I think it's a King cruise control, KC 2500 maybe, and I had installed one on a truck before, so I knew what I was doing. When I threw this one on, it works great. It's got a couple of hinks. Every once in a while it'll just drop off, and it has to do with, I think, the way that the cabling is routed. It just over torques the motor, so I can get around it, but it's not that big of a deal that I'm really worried about it, and it's so much nicer. You can just set it at the speed and down the road you go. You don't have to worry about it. On the flats, if you start getting into gradual uphills or real significant headwinds, again, you start monitoring your EGT. If it starts to climb, you start to back off. Okay, so startup is pretty basic. We have the ignition switch here. Click it to the right, we'll get a beep for a minute. And that was, of course, the low air alarm. And you can see here, we don't have low air, so it goes off. All the instruments work great. These are the original clusters. So this is water temperature, battery state, oil pressure, and transmission temperature. We also added these two gauges. The one on the left is the EGT, or exhaust gas temperatures, I was referring to earlier. And this is the boost gauge. Couldn't find a boost gauge up here, a dedicated boost gauge up here in the mountains, so I got a vacuum boost gauge, and we never, of course, pull vacuum, but it works pretty well up on the boost side, so it's good to go. And then we also talked about the cruise control, which again is very, very nice for those long distance trips, but it has another added feature which is kind of cool, which is a high idle switch. So I can flip the cruise control on and click this down once. move over to the tachometer, you'll see it's running about 700, 750 RPM at normal idle. If I just clip that down one time, it'll pop it up into a high idle. I can then hold this switch up and it'll continue to increase RPM. So if for any reason I want to run a higher RPM than normal, whether it's to build temperature or to build air pressure, I can use that feature of the KC2500, and it's very nice. And then when I'm done, simply flip it off, and it goes off. The inside of the bus was naturally completely gutted. We took it all the way down to the galvanized floor. We cleaned up a little bit of rust that was on the flooring. Then we painted the entire interior, less the roof, with a red oxide primer. We also used an OSPHO product, which is phosphoric acid, which any residual rust that you can't see, it chemically converts it into a paintable surface, into iron oxide is rust, so iron phosphate, I guess. I don't know. But it worked really, really well. And then we put down a vapor liner and a cork floor in this particular bus, which is really nice. It's durable, it's easy to clean, and it doesn't transmit a whole lot of not a whole lot of thermal, cold or hot comes up through it. So it's a pretty good choice for us on this particular bus. And it's thin, it's low profile, which means I'm right at 6 foot, and this is not a raised roof bus. So naturally, when I'm in there, I'm kind of kicking my head to the right or to the left. And had we put in a thick subfloor and a thick flooring material, it'd be even worse. So once the flooring was in, we decided we were going to start doing the layout for the bunk beds and the master beds. We had done some preliminary work with the steel framing and the steel fabrication, how we thought it was going to look, and had to accommodate the size with respect to how thick the floor was going to be. But we felt pretty good about our initial layout, which gave us a California King in the back, which was an extension of the existing rear seat engine compartment cover. And we were going to build in a custom little lifting lid on that, which came out really, really well. And then we were going to have a left bed and a right bed, similar to bunk systems, but we were going to give a lot of headroom where a full-size adult could actually sit up, not hit their head. And then above was going to be some shelving that we were going to use for additional storage. It all seemed to work out really, really well. So after it's all in and said, the front panel was all stained and the rear top panels were all stained and the door was put in place, and this is what it looked like prior to putting the floor in. And then we had this custom door. It was almost a 4x8 sheet of plywood that we put an electric actuator on that allowed us to access a huge amount of space underneath, so that we could use it for storage. Eventually our furnace goes in the space as well. Here in the foreground you can see the refrigerator. Every time we were working in a space, I always tried to include the next device that we were going to be building towards, just to keep the flow going and to appreciate where everything had to be and where everything had to line up. It was very challenging. The bus is a confined space and there are existing systems that you have to work around. So with the bunks, it was no different. Curved roofs or ceilings and everything else that goes along with it. It was a lot of in and out. Build it, put it in, tweak it, modify it, take it back out, put it back in. I probably put this bunking system in and out half a dozen times until we got it right where it wanted to be, right where it needed to be, to wind up with the finished product that we're very, very happy with. The California King with IKEA memory foam mattress is probably the most comfortable bed we have. And similar mattresses for the two boys, 13-year-old boys. Those are 6'2" bunks, and very, very comfortable. Very, very. It's just perfect for us. We're really, really happy with it. Now, working our way forward, we have the shower and the refrigerator in their approximate location. We had to build the shower out first. I mentioned before it's not a high ceiling for me, so it works really well for my wife and kids, but it's a little tight for me. But the tub had to be placed, and we had to consider where the drainage could go on it, and we also had to consider where the plumbing was going to come up, and we had to make sure that was all clear so that when we went to install it, that we didn't have any issues. And we also had to make sure that we could get it clear for the refrigerator, which goes right next to the shower. We needed to make sure that we could penetrate the wall for the vent system, as well as penetrating the ceiling. So we had to be in between cross members, all very, very important. Stuff we had laid out before, but as you move your way along, sometimes that can get a little tricky. You want to make sure that you're still hitting all your marks. And we did. It worked out very, very well. Bathroom is across the hall from the shower and refrigerator, and it's pretty straightforward. IKEA cabinet with IKEA sink, and it worked out really, really well. It's nice and cozy. We have heat plumbed into it, so on those cold winter nights, we can go in there and not freeze, which is very nice. And we also have an upgraded toilet, so it's a little higher than a standard toilet in an RV. It works very well for us. We didn't see any issues, and there's also the emergency exit door on the side is where I'm taking a majority of these shots through, where you can see it in the background. Works very well too as an emergency escape. So if we need to get out of the bus in an emergency, it's there and we're good to go. Once the bathroom was done, then we moved our way forward into the kitchen area. On the passenger side, we have a full set of cabinets that have the range, sink, and nice soft close IKEA cabinets underneath. Our countertop solutions were actually kind of unique. We had a lot of leftover plywood, 3/4 inch and 1/2 inch plywood. So I ripped them all down to about 1.5 inches, stood them on end, glued them together, and it created a pretty unique looking cabinet. And it was countertop, and it was real cheap. So we took those, glued them together, belt sanded it down as smooth as I could get it. They're not planed, but it adds a unique texture to it, which is kind of nice. Then we had to lay out the range on top as well as the deep farm sink. And once all that was laid out and cut into place, we were pretty well good to go. And we put all of the IKEA cabinets together on the floor, brought them in one by one, and started to build it out. It really came together nice. It only took Allison and I about, 4 or 5 hours at IKEA doing the layout. And they came out really well. We were really happy with the form and the functionality of them. And here you can see that we did the stain and all the finish on them, got them all installed. All the end pieces and end caps were put on, and then we did a lot of custom steel wrapping. I had a bunch of steel banding left around, so we just wire wheeled that, cleaned it up a little bit, cut it, welded it, and clear coated it. And it put some nice details, as well as the backsplash you can see there on the left, into the kitchen. And we were really happy with the way it came out. So the biggest questions we usually get is, how long did it take you and how much did it cost? Well, I'm not going to talk about how much it costs, but the fits and finishes that you want to put in it really are going to dictate how much the project's going to cost you. It can cost you $10,000 to convert it if you do it by yourself. It can cost you $100,000 to convert it. I can tell you that our project fell somewhere in the middle of those two numbers. I can also tell you that it took me about 2.5 years to get it completed. Maybe 2, but about 2.5. And you're never really done. That 2.5 years was from school bus to drivable, functioning RV. But as you use it, you start to see things that you can do with it. There's more things that you want to put in it. TVs and cable hookups, and the heat's never quite right. So those are some of the things that you are always working on, and it's a labor of love. You really have to enjoy the work, and I did. I enjoyed every aspect of it, from the mechanical side of it to the finished work. It was a very enjoyable project that I was able to work on with my boys and with my wife and friends who would come over and help sometimes. It was a project to remember. So that's the bus. Hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did putting it together for you. If you have any comments or questions, by all means, send them our way and we'll be glad to answer anything you have to ask. We're going to be sure to put some more videos together for you guys as we start to live our life in this bus. We're about to do a 3-week journey starting in about a week, and it should be very interesting. So we'll shoot some video, we'll start putting it on a vlog and showing everybody what it's like to full-time, part-time in a Skoolie.